Okay, so today we're going to talk about WCAG 2.2 and the changes that are coming, what has been going on, and our objectives for today. So we're going to start with introductions. That's going to be about me. Then we're going to talk about 2.2 and where things stand right now. I have a couple of final thoughts. You know, it starts as one and then it just keeps going. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have time for Q&A. When I tell you that there are 60 slides in this deck, you're going to sound scared, but we do kind of go at pace, so don't worry too much. Introductions about me. So I'm Jessica Chambers. I'm a senior customer success engineer. That's a fancy pants way of saying that I'm part of the customer success team. So I like help you and make you do awesome stuff. But I'm far more technical than most people. I'm a government and accessibility specialist here at Silktide. I've been here for 10 years, so there isn't much I don't know about the company if you ever have questions. And my one claim to fame is that I was immortalized as a minor character in a video game. To describe myself briefly, for those who can't see, I have worn my hair in pigtails today, and I'm wearing my customary giant pink kitty ear headphones. So, first, a warning. This slide is indicative of how I'd like to share information. It's entitled First, a Warning, and it has a screen grab from the movie Death Becomes Her that reads, Now, a warning. I will describe all the memes, but I'm likely to ignore the snarky titles I put on the slides that use this format because they're not particularly relevant and may even be kind of obscure references. One's titled, I Make Myself Laugh. Another is, It's Not Me, It's You. Anyway, if you see one you want explained, put it in the chat. We'll discuss it in the Q&A. Mostly the slide is here so that I remember to tell you that I have my own opinions that do not necessarily reflect those of Socketim or Silktide. I will remind you again of this later. Oh, and a shout out to W3C while we're here, because I borrowed their images heavily for this presentation, and they're actually really great. So, on with the show. Let's talk about what's new in WCAG 2.2. This is an image from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It says, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. The reason I'm mentioning this is because the working draft really means subject to change. A lot. This totally came up because the group updated the editor draft on May 9th. So, as you might imagine, when I was hip deep in trying to build out my presentation, things were changing. It was super fun. And by super fun, I mean it totally wreaked havoc. The expected finish, as was mentioned, is now September 2022, but that's subject to change. So we're not sure, honestly. You may note as we go also that I've ripped out all the numbers for the success criterion because they're also subject to change. We are going to cover something that was removed from the working draft just because I think it's important that we talk about what's being looked at, you know, because it's kind of an insight into what the future seems to be bringing. We're going to begin with page break navigation. This is an A-level requirement. It's about separating the pagination from the printed page numbers, right? So this applies to web versions of documents because PDFs and EPUBs and the readers that you use for them generally already have this functionality built in, right? But when you bring it to the web, it often goes away. This matters because when I was in school, open your books to page 37. Do the exercises on page 42, right? Like, we need to all be on the same page, right? And the W3C quote that I pulled here is digital publishing, while providing greater access to information, threatens the ability for everyone to locate information by page number. So when it comes to identifying that, I don't know what technology we're going to find that's going to do this, but it's definitely something we need to be thinking about. I'm not sure this is actually going to make it into like the next set of guidelines because I think this one's a bit difficult, but I think it's important because when you find yourself in a situation like me where I need to enlarge the text, the pagination changes. So, yeah, I end up in a situation where like I love my Kindle to death, but I put it at like font size 9. But that means that when I'm reading, I have no idea what page I'm on. I'm usually like, oh, hey, I'm 74% of the way through the book. But it could be anywhere. And like, we need to find a way to bring that same technology where you can say, I want to go to page 47, and have it match up. The next one we're going to cover is target size. You're going to see this happen a few times. There will be like a minimum and an enhanced. I really quite like this solution. So my comment here was hitting the nail, not your thumb. So what they're trying to get at is that when you are using your phone specifically, you often have buttons and icons that you need to interact with. And what they're trying to do is make it so that you ensure those icons have at least 24 pixels on each side, right? So like the size of it needs to be 24 by 24. This really isn't that big, but it's a start, right? So we're saying it has to be that way. There are ways to do it slightly differently. You can have 20 pixel icons and then put a 4-pixel gap in between them. That gets you to the 24 as well. But what you can't do is have 20 pixel icons. So this is going to be one of those things where I think it will be relatively easy to automate the testing of this. Yay. But it's something we need to really be thinking about, because this is totally doable, but it's an issue you're going to think about when you're designing, right? Because, it is about being able to tap things with your fingers. I mean, I just keep thinking about my mother-in-law. She's 84 and she has a really hard time. Yeah, we got her an iPad a few years ago and she's starting to get the hang of it, but like, it's a bit of a thing. Some of the other examples they provided are ways that you can use this, right? So this image is about showing you what 24 pixels together, where they're all lined up is. You could, for example, make really small, like tiny little buttons, as long as you separate them out far enough, right? So they've made 10 pixel squares, but that meant they had to put 14 pixel gaps in between them to get to 24. And it uses up a lot more screen real estate overall than it would otherwise. So it's one of the things they're trying to get you to think about, is that there are different ways you can approach this, but they all come with pros and cons. This image is showing you a list of links. These happen to be people's names, right? But what they're showing you on one side is that they've used a line height of 25 pixels, right? Which separates them out and gives you the 24 pixel size, right? And on the right, they've used 16.8. So they're actually quite condensed. And when you stop thinking of them as just like a list of things, these are a list of links. So again, it comes down to whether or not it's easy for someone to tap on them without tapping on something nearby. And between us, I think it looks far better with just that little bit of extra cell padding. The third example I want to talk about here is a drop-down menu. So this is using the same font size across both of these images, right? But the one on the left, the cell sizes are 24 pixels, and on the one on the right, they're 20. And that 4-pixel difference doesn't seem like it would be a lot, but when you look at it, it actually just looks more open and easier to tap on, and a little less condensed. So I think it's easier in this case to argue that it does look better, as well as providing better functionality. Remember I said they come in twos? So this is target size enhanced. This takes you from 24 pixels to 44. So this is actually a huge jump in size. Harkening back to the original image with the 24 pixels and the 20 with the 4-pixel spaces, this gives you an idea of the size, the relative size change, right? So 44 pixels is fairly big. And honestly, I wonder if that's where we're headed, right? Like right now, it's going to be the AAA version or it seems it will be. It's still an editor draft, but that may come down. It may be that like we just need to start considering whether or not 24 is going to be enough. Yeah. Next, we're going to talk about dragging movements. So this is about your free-form gestures from point A to point B. And, I'll be perfectly honest, I never gave much thought to dragging movements until now. So let's talk about what a dragging movement actually is. So you tap or click to define your starting point, right? That's usually like to pick something up so you can move it. But then you've got to maintain contact. So you're like holding the press down, and then you move the pointer to a specific position and then release it in the desired position, right? Once you think about it like that, it's actually a fairly complex set of things that you have to do. And it's everywhere, right? Whether it's sliders or Kanban boards or maps, we have different forms of dragging and gesture movements showing up everywhere. The last thing I want to mention on this front is what gestures are, right? So there's path-based gestures, which often are things like tracing a shape, or I've seen on some phones where like you can have a pattern that you've defined as your login. But they can include swiping, sliders, carousels. You find those can be included in dragging movements too, because there's so much overlap, right? But dragging is often seen as a free-form gesture. So instead of having to follow a pattern, like I can pick it up, move it all over the screen as long as I end where I need it to be. I know, just putting all this out there is food for thought. Again, I don't have a great solution yet. One of the things I noticed is when I was building my slides is that there was an option to like select a slide, and then I think it's holding control and the arrow keys, and I could adjust where it was. And I was like, that's a start. So one of the things we do is allow you to use a drop down where you can just move it up and down the list of things. And that kind of helps rather than having to pick it up and move it. So there will be ways we can move around this in the future. Right. Some of you are going to remember this from our last get together, but we're going to do it again. And trust me on this one, there are reasons, not just least of which is that I like to make people think about this. So, can you read this? I mean, probably. I bet most of you can. What about this? We all good? Now squint. Take a look at the screen and squint. If you're like me, you're going to find that the read more on the right just disappears. It might as well not even be there. If you have questions about whether or not your color contrast is good enough, one of the quickest down-home solutions I have is to squint at the screen and be like, wait a minute, that seems to be disappearing for me. This is a problem. Yes, there are plenty of tools that can check these things for you, but I'm very big on just like, tell me right now. So now that we've had this fun experience, and y'all like that, right? Super easy to do. Now that we've built some trust, we have an image of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 saying, "Come with me if you want to live." I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I know, it's weird. Bear with me. I want you to picture a website in your mind, if you can. Some people have aphantasia. I do too, so I don't have a mind's eye visualization option. But picture a website. Now I want you to tell me, without opening your eyes, picturing the website, where's the login? I'm giving you a moment to think about that. Was your answer that it's in the top right? That does seem to be common, right? Keeping your eyes closed and thinking about the website. Where's the chat widget? For me, it's usually at the bottom right. That's kind of where I expect to find it. This brings us to consistent help. Same bat time, same bat channel, right? You can open your eyes. There is no requirement to provide help on your website. This is an important detail. You don't have to, right? But if you do provide help on your website, like live chat, it has to be consistent. So, like, if you have live chat and you put it in the bottom right, you've got to make sure it's always in the bottom right so that anyone using the site knows that's where they can go. If the link to support is in the footer, always in the footer, right? And if you do cool things like little tool tips with the little question marks and whatnot, that's great. But again, it's got to be consistent. Consistency is a major thing. And again, I think that was covered a bit in the empathetic design, which I think was on Wednesday. Yeah, I really liked that talk. But breaking the rules just because you feel like it doesn't actually provide a better user experience, right? Like, don't put your login in the center of the page, like, unless you've got a really good reason. Like, it should be in the top right where everyone expects to find these things. Your hamburger menu should be in the top corner. You know what I mean? Like, breaking the convention should only be done if there's a really good reason. Yeah. So visible controls was a double A requirement. I did say was. It's been removed in the May 9 editor's draft, but we're going to cover this anyway because I think it's actually kind of important. This is one of the images they used. I may have added a panned and a little question mark. But what they were trying to get at is that you can't hide the controls. Like, if people need them, they shouldn't be something you have to focus on or put a hover state on in order to see the controls and the menu, right? It's just mean. And I swear I've used this conference software they're riffing off of. Like, I'm not sure which one it was, but what I remember is exactly this. If you hovered over that mute button, the menu expanded, and it was kind of off-putting. And I was like, "Wow, you think you're being awesome, but you're really not." You know what I mean? Like, this is not great. So honestly, just don't do that. If you have controls that people need to use, make them available. Don't make it something where they're going to have to figure out where it is or interact with it properly to expose them. It's just not great for anybody. This has been removed, so I don't know if it's going to come back. But again, I think that when we start thinking about what's coming and what the future holds and what we can be doing now to advance the inclusion and accessibility of websites and apps, it's something we need to make sure we talk about. Accessible authentication. So this is a double A requirement and it's new, and we've got a bunch of slides to talk about this because I was amazed that once you start looking for it, it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And the message I have for you is simple. Don't make this harder than it has to be. People need to log in, right? But we can make this easier and still keep it secure. So this screenshot is actually from the National Cybersecurity Center's blog. It says, "Let them paste passwords." And allow your website to accept pasted passwords. It makes your site more secure, not less, which I thought was really interesting. This is true. And honestly, anyone who blocks pasting passwords really needs to have a talk with themselves, because so many people use things like 1Password or other things that like keep their passwords together in a safe place, and that's exactly how it works. It pastes the password in, so it's just not cool. One of the things I want to mention here is they explicitly talk about providing alternatives to cognitive function tests. And I know that's a bit of a mouthful, cognitive function test, but essentially what they're talking about is memorization of things like usernames and passwords, transcription, where from one device to another, you have to type something in, right? Calculations of things like 5 plus 7 equals whatever, right? And puzzles, recaptures with pictures. That one really struck me because recaptures with pictures can actually be quite culture based. You know, like what a taxi looks like in one country may be different to another. An ambulance in the UK looks very different than what it looks like in the US. So that one can be a bit tougher. I've put a little note here because when it comes to memorization, there are exceptions for name, email address, and phone number, because those are things that they assume you would probably know, right? It doesn't necessarily provide an undue burden for you to remember those things. We're going to go over a few examples. So this one is from eBay. They're definitely trying, right? They have a need help signing in option. And if you click that, it opens up this menu that says sign in without a password or reset your password, right? But if you click on sign in without a password, it says, hey, I'll text you a single use code, right? Now, this sounds great, except this is exactly what they're trying to get you to not do. Because if you can't tell, these screenshots came from desktop. So it's going to send a text message to my mobile phone, which means I've got a message here that I've then got to type onto my keyboard to make sure it goes through, right? That is the definition of transcription, where they're like, we need to move away from things like this. It's creating undue burdens. It works a little better in mobile often, and we're going to talk about that because sometimes magical things happen and make it easier. So, a couple more examples. This is Steam telling me here is the code you need to log in. But what you might notice here is that it uses letters. And I'm just going to say it, Steam. Stop doing this, right? Make it a 6-digit code, make it a 5-digit code, but don't use letters and numbers. They're so much harder to enter on a phone, as an example. Yeah, so that kind of thing really irritates me. Over on the right, I found someone's screenshot from messages they were getting from PayPal. So like your security code is 540226. Your code expires in 10 minutes. Please don't reply. Yeah, you probably need to type it in. One of the things that is allowed, which I thought was really interesting, was that you're allowed to ask the user to provide passphrases or images, things they choose, right? So one of the things Barclays did years ago was say that they wanted you to type in a phrase, right? Or something that you would recognize that you had written, right? So that when you loaded their app, you could be sure the login screen was actually theirs, you know, and like not being spoofed or something. So I made mine a riff on, you know, that's what she said, because it was funny. They had a limited number of characters. But I thought that was a nice way of handling it because they're not asking me to remember extra stuff, right? They do allow me to log in with my face, you know, as well as a 5-digit passcode. So I was like, you know what, they're giving me some options. But don't think they're totally great. This was yesterday. The one thing I noticed is like the second you start thinking about like accessible authentication, you start really paying attention to how it works. Now I grant you, iPhones apparently are like, no, we're not going to screenshot your keyboard, which annoyed me, but I'll explain as we go. So Barclays has a number of problems. They sent me a text message that says, don't share this code with anyone in all caps. Your secure OTP is, and it cut it off. So while I was looking at where I could be typing it in, it actually is hiding the answer. I can't stress this enough to anyone who does this. Do not put the code at the end of the message. Think about how you can put it toward the front so that people can actually use it and see it. I had to leave the app go to my text messages, look at what it was, try to keep the 6 digits in my head, come back here, and then, unfortunately, my screenshot doesn't have it. It gave me the QWERTY keyboard. It was 6 numbers, and it gave me the regular standard, QWERTY letter keyboard. They don't have to do that. They could have identified that field as having numbers. On the other hand, I also got a message from American Express trying to get me to approve that it was me. And they put in their text message, American Express one-time password 524074, right? And in their case, not only could I see it, that what's totally missing is the numerical keyboard that showed up, and it had pulled in from the text message what the code was. So I just had to click the center, like, where they put the prompt for, like, did you mean this word? Yeah. And it just took care of it. And I was like, wow, there are way easier ways for people to engage with this. But it's definitely requiring effort on the part of who's ever making it. So I'm just putting it out there for everyone. If you make logins like this and two-factor authentication and whatnot, there have got to be ways you can make it better. One of the main reasons, or the main things they want you to do and want you to consider, is called a magic link. So you say, I can't log in, or I can't remember my password, and it says, do you want to log in with a magic link? What that does is send an email to your registered email address, thus providing a situation where the only thing you need to remember is how to get into your email. Right? And it gives you something like this. I don't know what RideFinder is, but I wanted stuff I could find online. And as you see, there's a big button that says sign into RideFinder, or there's a link, and you can see they're using Auth0, right? But what it allows you to do is click the link, and it just automatically signs you in. Done. No need to remember some password or unique username or all those things. It's just taken care of. This brings us to the accessible authentication with no exceptions, right? Where they say, you know what? You just have to make this work. And when I first read this, I was like, I can't think of anyone who's doing this, right? Who's actually even getting close to nailing the AAA version of this. And then, because, apparently I have a shopping habit, I found one. So this is PayPal. I know, PayPal that I just spent time bashing because of their text messages. They have a new form of authentication that's showing up, right? It says authentication required, right? And they're like, we need to confirm it's really you. And they've given me 3 options: confirm using their app, receive a text, or have us call you, right? If you're like me and you're on your phone, I'm like, oh yeah, definitely use the PayPal app, right? So I've chosen that. But again, they've given me the option, confirm a different way. So if I want to, I can go back and choose something else. When you log into PayPal, their app, at least in my case, I've got Face ID turned on, right? So like it just insta logs me in and says, are you trying to log in on the web? No thanks, or yes, confirm. One click for confirm. It says, thank you for confirming. You're all set. And I left there and went back to what I was trying to buy, and it was done. And I was like, can we all have this? Can we all take a lesson from, like, PayPal, who is quite serious about this stuff, having found a way that's so much easier to interact with and makes especially the experience on your mobile phone so much easier. Everyone with me so far? So, redundant entry. I love W3C. They just name things the most hilarious things. My note here says, don't make me tell you again. Redundant entry is a level A requirement that's shown up in 2.2, and I don't think this is going anywhere. I think this one's sticking. But I'm just going to give you one example. So this is an example where there's a tick box to say that the shipping address is the same as the billing address, right? That's exactly what they mean. Like, do I need to type it in again or can you just accept that like that information is the same thing, so why make me do it again? It's about removing friction. And honestly, I can't think of a form that I've seen that has asked me to repeat myself as I go, right? I don't know if any of you have. I'd definitely be keen to find out. But the one thing I will grant this, it's a level A criterion. It will ensure that never happens, right? Where like they ask you for something and then 3 screens later they ask you to repeat it. It's one thing to like double check that you put your email address in right or your password in right, but it's a way different thing to start asking for like your name and date of birth again 4 steps in, right? It should already know that. So, one of the more interesting changes, as far as I was concerned, is focus visible. This has been around. It's not like super new, right? But they're taking it from AA and they're making it an A requirement. And from my perspective, this doesn't happen very often. So I was really, really happy, like over the moon happy. Focus states are one of my biggest bugbears, and I will beat a drum about it from here until the cows come home. It's just a thing. I think we should all be doing it. I think we should be doing a better job of it. So happy about this. Can't express it. As a reminder for anyone who doesn't know, uh, this is a screenshot from a video that Jordan and I made, uh, because focus isn't hover, right? And this comes up all the time, right? Hover is the really cool, like you put your mouse over it, and focus is tabbed navigation, right? It's your keyboard and it's all sorts of other methods, right? But what it amounts to is not using a mouse to hover over things, right? So focus is uh, my notes say, when it comes to hover, you can make that the prettiest thing you ever did see. Go with your bad self, right? It is actually meant to be part of the design. It's meant to be kind of pretty and like, oh, look at the nice colors they use, right? That is not the case for focus. Like, I can't stress this enough. Focus needs to be a bright, contrasting color. And we're going to get into why in a minute. Uh, Keyboard navigation, honestly, is one of the it's just one form, like I mentioned, of like how people might be interacting with their website where they use focus, but it's the easiest one you can use yourself. So seriously, when we're done today, open up your own website and try to navigate it without your mouse, right? Just start hitting the tab key and see what the experience is like. You might be really surprised. It might be awesome. You never know. They've introduced something called Focus Not Obscured. This is a double A requirement at the moment. I'm going to keep saying at the moment and subject to change and all those things because, like, I don't know how this is going to play out over the next couple of months. But I think this one is actually important to note. The only thing I could really think of that would fit this, because some of these are definitely being built out, right, is that sticky menus are probably going to be a problem. Because what they're trying to get around is this, right? Where you may be focused on something and part of it is covered because the sticky menu is following you around, right? Like either the top or the bottom. Sometimes there's like sticky menus on the sides. There are reasons to use them. Like, I'm not going to say that sticky menus are inherently bad, right? Like, they've got reasons to exist. But the reality is, like, we've got to be thinking about this, and we need to think about why we are using a sticky menu. When this came up, I found myself laughing because I was like, oh, hey, because one of the things I noticed with the latest Silk Tide website is that we got rid of the sticky menus because we had them. And I was all like, oh, it looks so cool. And it's, yeah, because it's a design thing, right? And I was like, ooh, but that didn't make the website necessarily better. So it is the kind of thing where you're going to want to think about it. Like, do I need a sticky menu? What purpose is it serving? And does it end up covering up things on the screen? Right. Time for the it's not me, it's you slide. So the next slide and the next 10 slides are definitely my opinion. and should not be viewed as the opinions of anyone else. I definitely need to put this up here. So what we have here are a couple of memes. On the left is like the 1950s style man in a suit with his hand up, and it says, "Before we go any further, the disclaimer." And on the right is Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers series, like doing air quotes, and it says, "Disclaimer." Right. Yes, it's meant to make you laugh. This is also a meme. It's Kermit, the frog drinking Lipton's tea. Apparently, it came from an ad. It usually has a prominent Lipton's tea label like stuck to it, but that's been photoshopped out in this image. The meme text reads, "I think we should all switch to a version where there's no tea bag in Kermit's cup, but that's none of my business." This is just my way of owning that I'm about to be really picky. So, on with the show. Focus appearance minimum. Remember how I said this was my bugbear? Here it is. So there is a new AA requirement for defining what the minimum focus appearance needs to be. Right? Like you can say focus visible is now like an absolute requirement, but until you say what that means, it's a bit too woolly. This is definitely a work in progress. They're still ironing out a lot of details. The initial place they start is that the focus indicator must enclose the entire component, but not really. We'll get to that. The contrast has to be 1 to 3 to 1 for the focused versus unfocused states. So this is the same thing you're going to expect, 1 to 3.1. Yeah, and then the 1 to 4.5 that usually shows up in like AAA. So same kind of contrast issues. They're defining a minimum area for the focus state. And remember how we had that not fully obscured thing? It shows up again here, where they're like, your focus states can't be fully obscured, but they're allowing for that little bit that was allowed in the obscured issue. So let's talk about some of the exceptions. The exceptions are for things like you cannot change the focus state. Like maybe someone else made it and you're just stuck with it. If you chose not to change your focus states at all in CSS, the browser defaults are definitely getting better, but they're not perfect. If you use a thicker line, then you don't have to enclose the thing, or you can use a dotted line. And what I refer to as the super complicated one, which involves math and all sorts of things, I was just like, oh my god, why are we doing this? Which leads me to this. These are examples from their website as to what they believe will pass these requirements. Now, when I borrowed the images and like pasting them in here, it made them really big, right? And like they kind of look okay. So I'm going to go over a few of these. On the top left, we have buttons where one of them is highlighted with a drop shadow. I can't stand drop shadow. I think drop shadow should die in a fire. And I'm just going to say straight up, don't use drop shadow. Drop shadow is the one that brings in the math. Like you don't want to do this. I don't think it's noticeable enough, right? I mean, it's cool design wise, but that's not what we're here for, is it? Then we have a couple that have, one of them has a big yellow bar down the left side, right? That's what they mean. Like if you use a 4 pixel line down the smallest side of the box, that's okay, right? Below that, we have stars, like a star rating system. And to know which one you've selected, one of them has a big box around it, but they're also trying to tell you that you are allowed to put a line that follows the shape, right? Which you can see in the bottom left of this image. On the right-hand side, I've got a couple of blue example boxes and a relatively thick yellow line inside the border of one of them, right? Now, when I looked at these, I thought, man, when I bring them in here, they look really awesome. So I was like, yeah, how about we take a screenshot of the actual page that these examples were on so you can see them in context and how small they are? I'm going to harken back. I need you to take a look at this, and I need you to squint. particularly looking at those bottom two, the stars and the blue example boxes with the yellow lines. When squinting at it, I just want you to tell me, do you really think that's good enough? I'm a firm believer of go big or go home, right? Coming back to my like bright contrasting colors, these are screenshots from our Don't Be Afraid of Keyboard Navigation video. The point I was making in the video, and I'm going to make here, is that this isn't about being pretty, it's about being functional, right? No one's going to see your focus states if they don't need them. So, yes, I feel like a broken record, but I am going to stand on my desk and yell about this until it's universally great. So, this is the last experiment of today. Need you to close your eyes again. I know, it's weird interactive day. Keep them closed. No cheating. Now open them. Can you tell me where we are on the page? This is why it matters. If you get distracted, if the phone rings, or the doorbell goes, like, how would you know where you are? Don't make this hard. My complaint here is simple. The minimum should be this. Stop allowing for all sorts of exceptions so designers can put in tiny little lines or dotted lines or drop shadows. This isn't about being pretty. It's about making this easier for people who need it. And just like I drone on about how all tables should use scope, because if you always do it, then you don't need to think about it, and then you don't need exceptions. If you just make focus a bright, contrasting color, we can all stop arguing about it. There is an enhanced version, of course. That was minimum, remember? So there is enhanced. It's added that it needs to have a contrast ratio of 1 to 4.5. It expands the border to 2 CSS pixels. You can see why I was kind of cross. And it can't have any obscuring, right? Like all the focus states have to be exposed and can't be under something else. So here's the point of this whole thing for me, I think. This is an image, it's a cartoon. It's people standing in front of a building, and there's a man shoveling the steps, and there's a person in a wheelchair. And that person is saying, could you please shovel the ramp, which is totally covered in snow. And the person shoveling said, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you. And the person in the wheelchair says, but if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in. And it's captioned, clearing a path for people with special needs clears the path for everyone. So are we just ticking boxes, or are we making the web a better place? My absolute final thought. There is an old fable about the 3 laborers, right? I'm sure tons of you have heard this. It's about a man who stumbles onto some people who are working on a building site. And he asks them, what are you doing? And the first one says, I'm hauling rocks. Which, for all intents and purposes, definitely seems like what he's doing. The second one says, I'm building a wall. And the third one says, I'm building a cathedral. So when it feels Sisyphean, when it feels like you're just hauling the same rocks up the same hill and droning on about focus states and table scopes, remember what you're really doing. You're building a cathedral. You're making your website that provides information or services or goods more available to everyone. You're sharing. You're making the web a better place. One hauled rock at a time. Just in time for Q&A. As I said here, it's like AMA, but SFW. That again is a joke. It's like ask me anything but safe for work. So, time to talk.
Jessica, thank you. I think everyone's going to be so much to go over what you've covered. Really great presentation. And I know that the chat has been pinging off as you've been going, and your colleagues have kindly been responding. So fantastic. So, and I know that we've got the 10 minutes left, and I'm happy if others wanted to take questions after that, because I'm guessing there is going to be a fair few questions. So I'm going to pause there, and if you want to use the raise hand function, I'll bring you in accordingly. If you want to drop into the chat, we do have colleagues on there answering the questions. But Jess, fantastic presentation. Thanks again for taking your time to deliver that for us. So over to colleagues on the floor. Is there any questions that you've got for Jess or any colleagues of Silktide? You've stunned everyone, Jess.
I think we have a question in the chat, Dave.
Thank you very much, Tom. Let me just flick to that. Okay, so question here from Alexandra. Work for public sector organisation in the UK. Do you know if these requirements will become legally required? In brackets, WCAG 2.1 is for the UK public sector organisations.
I actually think they're going to adopt 2.2. If only here's the thing. They're going to have to hit, like, this is now the guidance, right? Right now it's still being drafted. There's huge sections that just aren't built out enough to be able to claim it's a proper guideline. So potentially, say they hit it and they say September, like they're locking it down and saying this is what it is. It's still going to be a number of months before the government could actually, like, say this is now the thing you have to do, just because it would be totally cruel to be like, no, it's here right now. But knowing that 2.2 is going to be the last milestone before the huge overhaul for 3.0, I do think this is going to be pushed through as the new standard. And honestly, I suspect all of that's going to be carried over into 3.0 as well. So part of the reason I wanted to do this presentation was to get people thinking about it and being like, what are the kinds of things they're adding? Because this is so much more about cognitive burden, right? And I think that's a huge thing, is to recognize that, like, a lot of this is, like, 2.1 was all about mobile, right? And like this one is all about cognitive burden, and they're, to at least in my opinion, you know, they're moving into more of a focus on cognitive burden, neurodivergence, you know, and it's kind of great. Yeah, I don't think most of this is a problem to do. I think part of it is going to be thinking about how that changes how you design, you know, and thinking about, like, what technology we can implement to make these things better. So I do think it's coming. If they're looking at September, it's not going to be in 2022, right? It'll be 2023 before they're making it a legal requirement.
So thanks, Jess. Another question, so I will come through. I'm going down as quick as I can with them. So what's the best way to set focus on YouTube embeds?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I'm going to have to come back to you on that one.
That's fine, not a problem. Robert, if you're happy for us to come back to you, obviously directly on there, if you just want to drop in your chat, or if someone's happy to put links in, that'll be fab. Question here. Council website is currently beta stage right now. Plan go live is May the 30th. Right now, they're currently working towards compliance. Question is, can they go live even though they're not fully compliant as yet?
I would not recommend doing that. There is a government body that is looking at the public sector websites, because public sector is the only group that is legally required in the UK to be at 2.1 AA standards. So if you know it's not there, that is a huge risk. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Yeah, I think it would be a major risk to put a website live to replace what you have now, which Okay, maybe it has some problems too that we don't know about. But I think that would be a massive risk because it is a legal requirement and has been for a number of years. So they are cracking down. We're hearing from councils that they're getting, messages through where it's like, here's your accessibility report, because they'll look at a handful of pages and just be like, here's your manual audit. Go fix these things.
Yeah. Can I?
I
It
was
was
going
me.
to say, Tina, do you want to come in there?
Yes, please. Thank you. So it's only me in digital, and I have got the Shore Trust to do like a scan of the beta. There's a couple of concerns there in terms of what the devs need to do, the people that have built our site, and there's also a couple of bits that I would probably need to do as a content editor. And our councillor said, oh, are we going to go live for the 30th? I was like, well, we're thinking that we can, but we haven't got our certificate from the Shore Trust because we haven't had our retests or anything like that. So if you're saying no, absolutely not, then I think what we need to probably do is to work through that recommendation report, fix everything, and then once we've got that certificate, then go live.
Yeah, if you're a council and that my boss will kill me for this. If you're a council and your site is like, if there's a way we can access it easily from the public internet, right, without having to log into things or whatever, maybe you put it behind HTTP authentication, talk to me. It's Jessica Chambers at soaktide.com, and we'll see what we can do to help, because we do the index, so we're doing lots of testing of council websites in general to give you an idea of what's going on with automated testing. It can't cover everything, right? It's somewhere between like 38 and 42% on average, but that should give you a much better idea. If you've got that covered, then there's a lot less that has to be looked at for manual testing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tina, for your question. There's a question in there and a couple of people reacting to it. What's the best way to make PDFs more accessible on the website? But I've just seen that Simon has answered that with a further link onto one of the Silktide webinars. So thank you.
We have an entire webinar about
exactly.
PDF accessibility, but I'm going to tell you straight, don't use them. Like, if you can avoid it, don't use them. And if you do need them, like, I get it. Sales guys love PDFs. Like, and if you got a huge document, PDFs are like, they're useful for, sighted, fully able-bodied people. However, one of the things you can do is make an HTML version of the document, right? Which means screen readers can use it, and it's in a native environment they're used to using, right? And honestly, like, there's like a button in Word like will make like an HTML version. So like, there's no reason you can't do it. And yeah, I know it's an extra step, but like, PDFs.
Thanks, Jess. I think we've covered all questions in the chat. Please, obviously, if we haven't, please, if you can just drop them in again, because I know when the chat goes, it's hard to keep track of them sometimes. We've still got a few minutes left. Is there anybody wants to add any further questions or wants to come in and ask any directly? Please do so. Yeah, pause for thoughts. Question coming, Jess. Will we be able to scan for these 2.2 elements within Silktide? I'm not apparently, Jamie. I don't know if that's in relation to another question up there, or Jess, if you know the answer on that.
Yeah, believe it or not, I know some of those answers. We are going to automate as much of it as we can. Some of them are going to be really, really hard, if not impossible. That like partially obscured focus states. Man, that's going to be hard. We don't know that we can do that one. But a lot of the other things, yeah, we're already looking into what technology will be required to be able to look for them. Because we think it matters. And when 2.2 goes live, we're going to have as many of these things as we can in your reports. And that does mean we will do things like make what we call the assisted checks, where like it needs a human to look at it. Where we might be like, hey, you know what, you need to go check these things and make sure this isn't happening. Because even if it's not something we can automate, we can help you with a workflow to look for it. So, if that helps.
Thank you. So once again, that's all the chat covered. I'm hoping we're coming sort of close to time now, and I appreciate people might have questions following this as well. Like I said, the session is being recorded. Please, obviously, you can listen back. There's many of the Silk-Tied colleagues. Obviously, thank you for helping out in terms of monitoring the chat. Obviously, there's people in there with contact details, and I'm sure that everyone would be happy to receive contact directly if there are any questions. Likewise, if you want to reach out to us at Soccerton, we can happily assist with Silk-Tied as well. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Jess once again for a great presentation, insightful presentation, and I really hope it's been really useful for everyone on the session today. It's been a cracking turnout, and obviously we look forward to seeing you all again soon. And any questions following this, please get in touch. Thanks very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. I hope
Thanks,
it helps.
Sam.
Thank you.